The theories of energy by Nikola Tesla have been revolutionary, to say the least.
The only way to light your home was with a candle or with a gas lamp. So you come to the World's Fair and flash.
The world knows Nikola Tesla as the great scientist who lit up the future with alternating current and dreamed of powering the entire planet without a single wire. But before that, he was seen as a madman who shut down a city's lights in the middle of the night, and nobody in Colorado Springs could explain why. Behind a fenced-off laboratory on an empty plain, Tesla had built a machine so powerful it would burn out a power plant, terrify a town, and push one trusted assistant to the edge of what any man should be asked to do. So what really happened that night? Join us as we uncover the events of night that changed history. How it all started. The man trusted with the switch. In the summer of 1899, Nikola Tesla did something that stunned even the people who thought they knew him best. At the height of his fame, the inventor behind alternating current, the man who had lit up the Chicago World's Fair.
In 1893, the deciding blow in the War of the Currents was delivered by Tesla when his AC power system made its international debut.
And turned the raw power of Niagara Falls into electricity for an entire nation, Tesla walked away from New York. He shut down his laboratory on Houston Street, packed away years of custom-built equipment, and shipped it all nearly 2,000 miles west to an empty, windswept stretch of land just outside Colorado Springs. There was no press conference, no public statement about what he was really planning. Officially, Tesla said he had come west to study atmospheric electricity, the natural voltage that moved through storms and static in sky. That much was true, but it wasn't the whole truth, and the people closest to him seemed to sense it. What Tesla was actually chasing was something far bigger than a weather study. He believed the Earth itself could act as a conductor, that electricity could be sent through the ground and pulled back out anywhere else on the planet. With no wires and no poles, power moving invisibly through the world itself. It was an idea so ambitious that even his own financial backers might have hesitated if they understood the full scope of it, and Tesla knew that. So he chose distance instead. Thinner air, higher altitude, and above all, room to work without anyone in New York looking too closely over his shoulder. Even though he wanted space, he didn't intend to test that idea alone. In the journey, he took Coleman Cheeto. You see, Cheeto had worked at Tesla's side for years by then, not as a scientist chasing recognition of his own, but as something far rarer in that laboratory. A man Tesla trusted completely. Tesla's work was never calm. It ran on unpredictable voltages, half-finished theories, and a boss who operated through the night on instinct as much as calculation. In that kind of environment, Zito was the one constant. He was that kind of guy who followed instructions exactly as given. He did not shake when the machinery screamed. He understood that when Tesla said, "Hold the switch closed until I tell you to release it," he meant precisely that, and nothing less. That kind of trust doesn't form overnight, and out on the Colorado plain, it was about to be tested in ways neither of them could have predicted. Away from city ordinances, curious neighbors, and the watching eyes of rival inventors, Tesla built something on a scale he had never attempted before. With Zito's help, he built a massive circular wall, 75 feet across, wound top to bottom with the coils of a primary circuit. Inside it, a second coil, roughly 10 feet wide, wound just as densely. And rising through the open roof at the center of it all, a mast 200 feet tall, capped with a copper ball 3 feet across, catching the light like the largest, strangest lightning rod anyone in Colorado Springs had ever laid eyes on. To the handful of locals who caught a glimpse of it from a distance, it didn't look like science. It looked like something out of a nightmare, or maybe a prophecy. Rumors spread fast through town. Some said Tesla was trying to signal Mars. Others whispered he was building a weapon capable of things no one wanted to imagine. Nobody outside that fence line had any real idea what was happening inside it, and Tesla had every intention of keeping it that way for as long as he possibly could.
The tests that were done by Tesla in 1899 to 1900 in Colorado Springs verified the fact that the use of wireless was actually possible.
Money was already a quiet pressure sitting behind all of it. Tesla was funding this operation on backing that expected results, and results in Tesla's world meant proof, not promises. Every test, every measurement, every careful adjustment out on that plane was building toward a moment he would eventually have to show someone. But that moment was still ahead of him. For now, the priority was control, understanding exactly what this machine could do before he let it do it at full strength. Behind that fence, the work itself was slow, careful, almost painfully unglamorous. Night after night, Tesla and Zito ran small, controlled tests, nothing close to what was coming. Zito would close the switch for a single second, no longer, while Tesla watched from the open doorway, studying the coil, the sparks gathering and glistening along the windings before the current cut out again. Then they would open the switch, review what they had learned, adjust something small, and try once more. It was patient, repetitive work, the kind that rarely makes it into the legend, but without which the legend could never happen at all. Each small test mapped the machine's behavior a little further, the way a sailor studies the tide before committing to open water. Tesla respected what he was building. He knew it could turn on him in an instant if he moved too fast, trusted too much, or misjudged the moment. Zito never asked why. He had seen enough of Tesla's genius up close to know that the strange hours and the total secrecy usually led somewhere extraordinary. And he didn't need the theory explained to him to feel that something significant was building, night after night, inside that circular wall. Night after night, they ran careful, controlled tests, but one night Tesla decided the caution was over and gave Zito an order he'd never given before. Now, stay with us because the order from that night changed everything as we know it. The order that changed everything. It was May 1899 and the night started like any other. The air was cool, the environment was quiet, and Zito arrived at the lab expecting another round of the same careful 1-second tests they had been running for weeks. Nothing about the evening suggested it would be any different. Then Tesla walked in. He told Zito the plan had changed. Tonight, when he closed the switch, he wasn't going to open it again after a second. He was going to hold it there no matter what he heard, no matter what he saw, until Tesla, and only Tesla, gave the word to stop. Now let's hold back for a moment because on paper that instruction doesn't make an ounce of sense. Every test they had run up to that point had been built around brief controlled bursts, precisely because Tesla didn't yet know what sustained, uninterrupted current through that coil would actually do. Holding the switch closed indefinitely meant removing the one safety measure that had kept the experiment predictable. So you see, it meant trusting the machine and trusting Zito, past the point where caution usually wins. But that was exactly the point. Tesla hadn't dragged his entire operation 2,000 miles from New York to keep running the same safe, careful tests forever. He had come to Colorado Springs to find out what his machine could really do, and that meant eventually someone had to stop holding back. There was a dry run first. Tesla walked Zito through the procedure one more time, the same way he always did before something significant, checking every detail, leaving nothing to chance. Tesla dressed for the occasion in a Prince Albert coat and a black derby hat, an oddly formal choice for a man about to stand in an open doorway and watch 200 feet of exposed machinery.
Colorado Springs to see if he could send electricity miles, which is a tremendous achievement. But he had a huge tower, and there was 200 feet to the top.
Come alive with more voltage than almost anyone on Earth had ever generated in one place. Everything checked out. The dry run went exactly as planned, and then it was time for the real thing. Tesla walked outside, out where he could keep his eyes fixed on the copper ball at the very top of the mast. He wanted the clearest possible view of what was about to happen, and he wanted to see it from a distance, the way an artist might step back from a canvas before the final stroke. From that position, he gave the command. Somewhere behind him, inside the wooden coil house, Zito closed the switch exactly as instructed and held it there. At first, nothing dramatic happened. A low electrical hum began building inside the structure, the ordinary sound of current finding its path. But it didn't stay ordinary for long. The coils inside the primary wall started to vibrate as the energy climbed, and the pitch of that hum changed quickly and unmistakably from something mechanical into something else entirely. Secondary coil became immersed in what witnesses would later describe as electrical fire, a shifting halo of current dancing along the windings. And then the sound began to change again. The crackling sharpened into something closer to snapping, like the crack of rifle fire cutting through the cold Colorado air. Then the snapping deepened further, rolling into something that sounded less like machinery and more like weather, like cannon fire echoing across an open field. Tesla would later write about that sound in his own notebook, describing the thunder as terrifying, powerful enough that it shook the entire building in what he called a most threatening fashion. This was not the language of a man exaggerating for effect. This was Tesla's own private account, written for no one but himself, and even he seemed startled by what his machine was capable of producing. Outside, standing where he had positioned himself to watch, Tesla saw the ball atop the mast begin to release something extraordinary. Streaks of lightning shot outward from the copper sphere, and they didn't stop at some modest, contained distance. The bolts started small, reaching maybe 10 feet from the ball, still enough to be startling on their own. And this is where it gets more interesting. To his greatest surprise, it didn't stay at 10 feet. Within moments, they stretched to 20, then 30, then 40 feet, growing steadily as the current inside the coils continued to build without any sign of slowing down. Zito held the switch closed exactly as instructed, even as the noise around him escalated into something closer to a controlled explosion than a scientific experiment. This was the moment that tested everything Tesla had spent years building between them. The trust that let Zito keep his hand steady on that switch while the machinery roared loud enough to shake the walls without an order to stop, without knowing exactly how far this was going to go, and without panicking in a situation where panic would have been the natural, reasonable response for almost anyone else standing in his position. The bolts kept growing, 80 feet, and then remarkably they kept climbing past even that, stretching out more than 135 feet from the copper ball at the mast's tip, bright blue lightning bolts longer than the building itself, tearing outward into the night sky in every direction. For a moment, Tesla stood in something close to awe of his own creation, watching electricity behave in a way that no human being had ever deliberately produced or witnessed at this scale before. This wasn't a demonstration for investors or a controlled test meant to prove a small, careful point. This was raw, uncontained power generated by two men, one machine, and a decision to finally stop holding back. What Tesla didn't fully grasp in that moment, standing outside in the cold, with his eyes locked on the mast, was that the current he was pouring into the sky wasn't staying contained to his own property. The scale of what he had just unleashed was bigger than a private test on an empty plane outside town. It was reaching further than his fence line, further than his own equipment, out toward a city that had no idea what was happening just beyond its edge, and no warning that anything was coming at all. The roar continued, the lightning kept stretching outward, and inside the coil house, Zito kept his hand exactly where Tesla had told him to keep it, waiting for the order that hadn't come yet. Neither of them could see in that moment exactly how far the effects of what they were doing had already traveled, or what was about to happen in the city sitting just beyond the edge of that open Colorado plain. Keep watching. What happened next that night would alter the course of history forever. The town goes dark. What Tesla didn't know yet was that the power surging through that mast wasn't staying inside his fence line. Almost 6 miles away, down at the El Paso Electric Company's power station, the very generator supplying Colorado Springs with its electricity was absorbing a current it had never been built to handle. High-frequency energy, invisible and completely untraceable back to its source, had found its way into the windings of that dynamo through nothing more than open air, and it was tearing through the insulation from the inside out. Tesla himself would later try to explain what was actually happening in scientific terms, writing years afterward that hundreds of kilowatts of high-frequency energy released from his coil had repeatedly overwhelmed the dynamos in a powerhouse miles away.
Before Tesla, you could only send electricity 1 mile just for lighting. After Tesla, you could run factories 400, 500, 600 miles in all directions,
causing sparks to jump straight through the windings and destroy the insulation entirely. In plain terms, he was saying that his machine was reaching a building he had never touched, breaking equipment he had never seen without a single wire connecting the two. Now here's where it gets interesting. Somewhere in the middle of Tesla's roaring 100-foot lightning display, that overwhelmed generator finally gave out completely. The largest dynamo on that side of the Mississippi, the machine responsible for keeping Colorado Springs lit through the night, burned out in a shower of sparks and smoke. And just like that, the entire city went dark. Streetlights, homes, storefronts, all of it gone in an instant. While 6 miles away, a man in a Prince Albert coat stood in an open doorway, watching lightning stretch further than he had ever dared push it before. Tesla, for his part, had no idea any of it had happened, not in the moment it actually occurred. All he knew, standing outside with his eyes fixed on that copper ball, was that the roar he had been watching build for the better part of an hour suddenly cut out. It did not cut the way electricity was supposed to fade. It simply stopped all at once, the thunder falling silent so abruptly it startled him almost as much as the lightning itself had. Tesla would later describe that exact sensation in his own notes as a terrific force suddenly falling silent and the power gone, as if some outside will had made the decision for him rather than his own hand on the switch. It hadn't been an outside will. It had been his own machine, reaching further than he understood, taking down a power plant he couldn't even see from where he stood. But that's not even the part that should surprise you most. The next morning, Tesla had to do something he had spent nearly his entire stay in Colorado Springs trying to avoid entirely: explain himself to people who had absolutely no idea what he had actually been building behind that fence with the keep out signs. So for the first time in 1899, Nikola Tesla picked up the telephone and called the Colorado Springs Electric Company directly. And according to his own later account, he wasn't just checking on the damage. He was trying to find out whether he was actually the one responsible for destroying their generator in the first place. That's worth sitting with for a second. One of the greatest inventors alive wasn't entirely sure, in the immediate aftermath, just how far his own experiment had reached. The answer came back fast, and it wasn't good news for anyone in town that night. Tesla had pulled so many amperes through that coil that he had, in fact, burned out the municipal generator entirely, the single largest piece of electrical equipment Colorado Springs owned. Fortunately for the city, they had a backup generator to fall back on, so the darkness didn't last. But the power company wasn't in a forgiving mood. Officials refused to give Tesla back his free electricity, the same free power that had made his entire operation possible in the first place, until he agreed to repair the destroyed generator at his own expense. Tesla paid for it. Crews had the replacement running again within days, and remarkably, the company allowed him to keep working after that, having apparently concluded that whatever was happening behind that fence was simply beyond their authority to stop. Word of what happened spread through Colorado Springs almost immediately, and it didn't take long for a single dramatic story to take hold. The mad scientist on the hill had blown out the entire town's power in one spectacular night. It's the version that's been repeated for well over a century, and it's not hard to see why it stuck. But a closer look at Tesla's own writings tells a slightly different story, one that's arguably even stranger. Rather than one isolated blackout, so don't go anywhere. Tesla himself later described the damage as repeated, the same distant powerhouse dynamos burning out again and again throughout his time there, each time requiring fresh repairs, each time proving the same unsettling point. Whatever he was generating inside that wooden building wasn't staying contained the way anyone, including Tesla, had originally assumed. Either way, one thing was undeniable.
The system that Tesla ultimately develops, alternating current, is something that over great distances does not lose its intensity.
Tesla had gotten far more than he bargained for that night. More power, more reach, and more attention than he'd ever intended to draw to an experiment he'd deliberately built 2,000 miles from anyone who might ask too many questions. But buried in the chaos of that night, in the noise, the darkness, and the burned-out equipment, was something even Tesla hadn't seen coming. Something stranger than a blown generator and far harder to explain away. The accident that proved everything. In the weeks that followed, as Tesla and Cito kept running the great coil at higher and higher power, something started appearing that had nothing to do with the wireless transmission Tesla thought he was chasing. Small balls of light, roughly the size of a golf ball, began forming near the equipment. They weren't sparks. They didn't behave like ordinary electricity at all. They drifted almost lazily through the air around the coil, hovering for a moment before vanishing or worse, detonating. And more than once, they exploded with enough force to shatter parts of Tesla's own mast and destroy equipment inside the laboratory, leaving scorch marks on wood that had somehow survived a 100-foot bolt of lightning just weeks earlier. Tesla hadn't set out to find this. He wasn't trying to produce them. And for a long time, he wasn't even sure what he was looking at. Cito had seen strange things happen around that coil before, but even he understood, without needing it explained, that this was different. This wasn't the roar of a controlled surge or the crack of an expected discharge. This was something forming on its own, out of the leftover violence of the experiment, behaving by rules neither man had written into the machine. Tesla recognized almost immediately that it mattered. He was witnessing by accident something scientists had puzzled over for centuries and never managed to explain. It was ball lightning, a phenomenon so rare and so poorly understood that most researchers only ever caught a glimpse of it. Once, maybe twice in a lifetime, during violent storms, gone before anyone could study it properly. Tesla was making it happen on command, inside a wooden building on an empty Colorado plain, and he could watch it as many times as his equipment could survive. But it gets better from here. Tesla didn't chase the fireballs for their own sake. He wasn't interested in them out of curiosity. What obsessed him was the mechanism behind them, because if he could understand exactly how his coil was producing that much concentrated energy in one small point in the open air, with no wire, no direct contact, nothing but distance between the source and the effect, he believed he was looking at proof of something far bigger. That huge amount of electrical power really could move through the earth and the air without a single wire connecting one point to another. Not in theory. He had already done it. He just hadn't fully understood what he had done until the fireballs made him look closer. The blackout wasn't just an accident to be apologized for and paid off. It was evidence. If a surge from his mast could reach a power station 6 miles away and burn out its generator without a wire between them, and if his coil could concentrate enough energy to form a ball of destructive plasma out of thin air, then wireless power transmission wasn't a theory anymore. It was something he had already done, whether he had meant to or not. Every burned-out dynamo, every shattered fireball, every scorched plank of wood in that laboratory was a data point in an argument Tesla was building, even if no one else in Colorado Springs understood they were watching an argument being built at all. That conviction is what Tesla carried out of Colorado Springs. He shut the lab down in 1900, packed up his notes, and went east chasing the same idea at a much larger scale. This time with backing from J.P. Morgan and a new tower rising on Long Island called Wardenclyffe.
The entire financial system is imploding in real time, and when every major bank is on the brink of collapse, only one institution gets the call to save the system: J.P. Morgan Chase.
He believed Colorado Springs had already shown him it could work. What he underestimated was how hard it would be to convince anyone else, especially a financier who wanted a return on his money, that a burned-out generator and a handful of unexplained fireballs on an empty plane amounted to proof of anything at all. Morgan pulled his funding before Wardenclyffe ever transmitted power the way Tesla promised it would. The tower sat unfinished, then abandoned, then was eventually torn down. For scrap during the First World War, a 200-foot monument to an idea nobody with money was willing to bet on anymore, and the fireballs themselves stayed a mystery for most of the 20th century, dismissed by some as exaggeration, until researchers decades later went back through Tesla's own notebooks and used his numbers, his exact measurements, to reproduce the effect in a lab. It worked. What he had stumbled into that night in Colorado Springs was real all along. Tesla never got the empire he was chasing. He never lived to see Wardenclyffe finished, or the world running on power pulled invisibly from the ground the way he believed it could. But somewhere behind that fence line, in one accidental, uncontained night, he had already found the proof. He just spent the rest of his life trying to get anyone else to believe it. And all of it came to pass because of one man, Coleman Zito, the assistant Tesla trusted to hold the switch.
Who is Coleman Zito? Well, he was an assistant of Nikola Tesla.
The same man who was not scared to share his story. And that's all. But before you go, what do you think about Tesla's decision to risk everything on one uncontrolled night? And do you think Zito deserves more credit for holding the line when things went beyond anyone's control? Share your opinions with us in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen and you will enjoy it.